What time is your test on Friday?
10.
Okay, so drinking on Purim. Let me start off by just asking generally, what do you think of substance abuse in general?
I wasn't really aware of it so much until last year.
I was never a fan.
Okay.
I was never a fan of the
general.
concept.
No, I'm saying in general.
In general.
Okay, I was saying in relation to Purim or in general? Okay.
Yeah, I'm first asking in general, sort of to, want to hear your thoughts. Just generally,
I mean, I feel like there's a lot of people that do a lot of that in places like this, and they should be smarter.
Okay, because what? Because of the outcome,
A lot
of
of
the way
times
they behave, or
the outcome. Sometimes you get people who end up like legitimately seriously hurt, injured, hospitalized, whatever. It's not always the case, but like,
which is very interesting because that's going to be the first source right here that we're going to deal with. Okay.
But then you've also got
Okay, so you're saying injuries, danger to society.
like that's one thing, but then you've also got people that just do stupid stuff that they end up regretting, and that's also a problem.
So meaning, if I could find like a safe drug to take alone in your room, just get high, you'd be fine with that.
I mean,
Like I'm just
like,
opening,
seriously
I'm
safe.
totally opening it up because
Yeah.
we're talking about an apparent mitzvah to
I'm saying something.
to use substance to alter your state of mind.
Is it
So
the substance or is it the fact that you have to be happy and this just helps?
that's a good question, but
'Cause I never
wine is
understood.
definitely mentioned. There are those who say that the mitzvah is specifically drinking wine, not any hard liquor, which, by the way, is a good idea because if somebody's anyway really trying to get drunk, drinking cups of vodka or whiskey or whatever it is not very helpful, and it's pretty gross afterwards. But wait, conclude your.
Just on
stop you in the
your
middle of a thought.
question you were saying, like, I mean, I suppose I don't think I personally would want to do it, but I would have no opposition to somebody who found something that's legitimately safe and is legal, and they're not like
It doesn't harm your body.
it doesn't permanently harm you in any way, and
Mhm.
like isn't going to make you crazy enough that you're going to do something like really stupid.
I mean, if I would prove to you that marijuana has no harm on your brain, no harm on your lungs. I mean, obviously all this is impossible because just generally
And you're
by
gonna have
smoking you're harming your
Yeah.
lungs. But just like, for the
suppose that
sake
would
of
be-
argument, let's
and
say
you've
it would
got
be,
someone in place who's going to make sure you don't do anything.
yeah,
that you shouldn't be
you're in
doing.
place. You put a combination lock on your room and you know that you're not going to
So
remember
just
the
even like
combination.
have a friend
You're-
have a friend hang out with you the whole time. Just make
Right,
sure you
okay.
don't like try to go driving.
So
or
you'd be
something.
fine with
Like,
that.
Yeah, that and if it were legal also, then like at that point I would have a problem with it.
Anybody tend to differ? Any arguments, fundamental arguments against drugs? and
I'm
stuff
saying
like that?
I wouldn't appreciate it.
Right.
It's not the sort of thing I would want to do. I'm still freaked out by the whole mind altering
Yeah.
anything like
Yeah,
that.
no, it
Altering
creeps me
your
out, yeah.
state
But I
in your
don't-
body, and that just to me is not
It's not.
appealing.
Yeah, it's not
Okay.
appealing to me, but that doesn't. I wouldn't take that away from someone else. I wouldn't say, "Oh, you can't do that. That's terrible."
Okay. So what I'd like to claim is that I think that at least some of the people who use different kinds of substances in order to alter their awareness, that deep down inside there really is something spiritual going on there, and they are striving for really some kind of other existence, which is beyond our normal day-to-day existence. Except, I believe that by using substances, you are, in a sense, like, as an example, like hacking into the system. Through deep spiritual activities and improving yourself and meditation and so on. It's like a lifetime commitment of work. I believe you can reach many of these states in a healthy way that really are not going to either be scary, like because you're saying, generally the whole mind-altering thing is like scary to me. It doesn't have to be scary. It's not going to be harmful, and it's really done the way Kadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do things. So again, in a sense, they're sort of like sneaking into a place that they really shouldn't be, which is why also it becomes very harmful. Again, forget physically and forget what they do with it. Obviously, if a person becomes violent, so that's just that's a problem in and of itself. But spiritually, what happens to a person becoming dependent on something, becoming constantly trying to detach yourself from the reality within which you live, and constantly striving to be in a different kind of place when you aren't really spiritually and emotionally capable of that, because you're just doing it with some kind of substance. That to me is the problem. So if you read between the lines, what I'm trying to say is that really the mind altering thing, the way we called it before, so deep down inside, it is something positive. It brings you to a certain place where you see certain things that you didn't see before, and there's a lot of truth to those. It's not just, someone playing around with your brain. There really is something going on there. Therefore, if it's done in a positive way, which 99% of the time is through study, prayer, meditation, self-improvement, mitzvah, and so on, and again, with deep dedication and many years of work, so you're going to reach that without any substances. And now we find one time a year where the Talmud is telling us you should use certain substance, and again, I'm stressing specifically wine. We're not talking about drugs here, and preferably not even any hard liquors. And I think it's worth giving it a thought. What exactly, first of all, is there a mitzvah? What is the extent of the mitzvah? And most importantly, what is the point of the mitzvah? Is it like any other random frat party where people just get smashed and wake up sick the next day? Is that what we're aiming for in Purim? Obviously, that's a rhetorical question. So that's what I'm trying to figure out through these sources. Somebody want to say something before? It seemed to me okay. So the Talmud in Megillah 7b brings the words of Rava, the famous words, Chayav inish levesume befuraya ad lo yada ben Aru Raman nevuch Mordechai. A person should become, well, interestingly, besume in modern Hebrew, when you say like lehit basem, so usually you mean like to get buzzed, as opposed to really drunk. Rashi explains that livsume lehishtaker beyayin. Okay, to really get drunk. So, let's take Rashi's interpretation. A person on Purim must get drunk up until the point that he will not know the difference between Aru Haman and Baruch Mordechai. Haman is cursed and Mordechai is blessed. Okay, great. Right after that, the Talmud brings a story about Rabbah and Rabbi Zera. Rabbah and Rabbi Zera had a mutual Purim Suda. They got drunk. Rabbah gets up and he slaughters Rabbi Zera. Okay, when Rabbah sobered up, well, actually, now I'm looking at the language of the Talmud. It says the next day, so it took him a while to sober up. He prayed for him and brought him back to life. Okay, so there was a miracle. Okay, great. Next year, Rabbah comes to Rabbi Zera and he says, "Okay, are we on for Purim Suda?" So Rabbi Zera says, "I don't think so. It wasn't such a great experience last year." And although there was, in the end, it worked out okay because there was a miracle. A miracle does not happen at every hour. That's the language of the Talmud. Okay, so what would you learn from the juxtaposition of Rava, famous, we even made a song out of it, and this kind of, I'd say, a weird story. I mean, these two great scholars having a meal together, and one ends up killing the other, but brings him back to life. What would you learn from this?
Be careful.
Be careful, okay.
The ways of what you drink.
Right,
The amount
okay.
that you're drinking. Don't go past a specific point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I hear that. I like that. Because that's sort of like middle ground between the two possible extremes that you can say here. Okay. Any other ideas?
I mean, yeah, it points out at the beginning, it says, until you don't know the difference between these things, but here's what happens if you go way too far. And quickly you don't
Right.
know.
Okay, so that's basically like the same point where Rava's ruling is valid, except we're just telling you, okay, by the way, be aware, stay within limits. What I'm trying to get at is that theoretically you could claim that the point of having this story come right after the words of Rava is to teach us that this is irrelevant. Like, Rava, you have a great idea, but look at what ends up happening, and therefore this is not the bottom line. This is not the way the average person should spend Purim, because even the greatest scholars ended up with a disaster. So, this is not a good idea. You could theoretically say that, and we'll see there are those who do bring that up. So it's interesting to me that, just as a brainstorm, like the first thing that came to your mind is, well, if these two things are put together, so apparently they're just trying to sort of weigh each other out and make sure that we get a full picture before we go ahead and do something that we might be sorry about. And the truth is that your interpretation, just without getting into any other sources, makes a lot of sense to me. Because really, if the whole point of bringing this story is to refute Rava, so just don't bring Rava and don't bring this story. I mean, we don't, there are tons of stories, many stories that occurred, which I'm sure would be fascinating to us, that were not recorded in the Talmud. This is sort of just an axiom, my basic assumption is that a story that's in the Talmud is really teaching us something. So we could have not brought what Rava says, not bring the story, and nobody would even think of getting drunk on Purim, and that would be the end of it.
But at the same time, that's the first thing that pops into my head, but someone who's looking at this saying that you should drink to the point where you don't know the difference can then say, well, look at this guy, he drank so much that he killed the guy, but he did what God wanted, so a miracle came and the other guy was brought back.
Okay. So you're saying the exact opposite. Like, you're saying this is a mitzvah and there's no real limit, because we're saying, like, basically when we say ad de lo yada, that's saying that there's no limit.
Right.
And the proof is that look at what happened, and if you do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks you to do, you'll be fine. I understand you correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's great. So now we have three possible interpretations, right? One is the extreme of saying, hey, the point of bringing this story is refuting Rava and saying it's irrelevant, this is a bad idea. Second extreme is saying, no, when we say ad de lo yada, we mean it. And you can go, as far as you need to in order to achieve this specific state of mind. And even if terrible things will happen, don't worry, it will work out in the end, because you're being a righteous person, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take care of you. Or you can have somewhere in the middle where you're saying, yes, this is a mitzvah, but be aware of what can happen. Therefore, put limits and don't just go ahead and drink carelessly. Which, by the way, if you are planning on actually drinking either this year or a different year, so or another year, so what happens often is that people don't realize how long it takes for alcohol to start having an effect, which is more or less like 15, 20 minutes, I think. So what happens is a person takes a drink and nothing happens. So 3 minutes later, say, well, nothing's happening, I have to have another drink. So, this goes on and on. So by the end of the 15, 20 minutes, they've had like 6 drinks, and then, it knocks in like hammers, like, one after the other, and then the person is smashed and thrown up and whatever. So, you have to, either way, really, if you want to drink in a meaningful way on Purim, you would have to take it easy anyway. The question is, when would you stop this process of waiting, 15, 20 minutes between drinks? Okay, so the second source here brings the famous shita of Rabbeinu Ephraim, who takes the approach of the last approach that we said, that the whole point of bringing this story is to refute Rava. Look at what can happen. This is, this is a terrible idea of drinking, definitely up until this point, of not knowing what's going on around you. And therefore, bottom line is, there is no mitzvah to drink on Purim. And I guess you could argue, according to his explanation, right, my question was, well, why record Rava and why record the story? Because, obviously Rava was living many, many years after the story of the Megillah. So, obviously Rava didn't just come out one day and said, oh, there's a mitzvah to drink on Purim. Probably what happened was that there was a tradition of drinking on Purim. And Rava, it could be that, yes, he took it like to the next level and said, it's not enough just to have a couple of drinks, like you should go ad lo yada. Okay, so that tradition exists and people will know about it, so it makes sense to record what Rava said and the argument against it in the form of this story in order for people to really get all the information. It's sort of like the difference of opinion between Rambam and the Ravid in Hilchot Shuvah, where Rambam asks the famous philosophical question of, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows everything that's going to happen, so that generally, intuitively would mean that the world is deterministic and you have no free choice. So how is it that the basis of our belief is free choice? Without free choice, you can forget about Judaism. So what is his answer? This is such a tremendous question. It's as long as Ukam Eretz Midah. It's longer than the size of Earth and deeper than the sea and so on. So, we can't really understand it, but so you should accept it as an axiom that you have free choice and that God knows everything. And don't try to figure it out. So Ravid says, wait, what's the point of that? You should if you bring up a question that you can't answer, so you're going to cause people to become heretics. And I actually heard a great explanation from Rabbi Shmuel Silber, who's a rabbi in Pikesville, if you know him. So he said that this is a fundamental difference of opinion between Rambam's whole way of thinking, his school of thought, and Ravid. Ravid is more concerned with, don't give people bad ideas, don't get them involved in things that might confuse them. Give them the information that they need, and that's it. And Rambam is saying, no, obviously people are thinking of these problems. Any average, normal human being would think of this philosophical problem. That's what Rambam is saying. And therefore, at least I wanted to show him that I'm aware of the problem and I'm addressing it. I, the Rambam, who have gone through the entire Torah in an amazing, astonishing way, been able to put it all together into categories and analyze it, and both the law and the philosophy and everything. I've been there, I've done that, I've thought of it, and it's okay. I can live with it. This doesn't really totally clash with my entire way of life. So that's an important message. So, I'm again trying to explain Rabbeinu Ephraim, why would this be in the Talmud if he thinks that it's such a terrible idea? Because people are dealing with this, because there is a tradition that people have been drinking throughout the ages on Purim, and in order to make sure that they realize the entirety of the issue and realize what can actually occur, and look what happened to the greatest scholars. Therefore, we're going to give them all the information that they need and make sure that this doesn't happen again. Okay, so there are a few other sources that you could keep the page and go through them, who say, obviously, there cannot be such a mitzvah of getting drunk. It's one of the greatest prohibitions in the Torah, because, as we discussed in the beginning, all the terrible things that it can cause, and violence and immorality and so on. And therefore, and they give different explanations of what exactly this is doing in the Talmud, but bottom line is they all agree there is no such mitzvah as drinking in Purim. Maybe, drink a little bit and go to sleep. Okay, so that's one school of thought. Now, just 1 second. Right, okay, so Rabbeinu Ephraim, that I quoted before, is brought in the Sefer HaEshkol, and Sefer HaEshkol himself disagrees with Rabbeinu Ephraim, so this is in source Chet here, and he says, I'm going to read the language because it's short, V'lia kotev nireh, I the writer believe, the mikan ra'ayah tzarich levesume, that from this source in the Talmud there is proof that one does need to drink on Purim. De'i lo havalei lemeimar, because if this were not the case, so what Rabbi Zera should have answered Rabbah is, ne'aved seuda, we should have a suda together, ve'adade, velo nivsam, and will not drink. Right? If the people themselves who had this experience understood, well, obviously, this year we're going to drink as well. And I'm just telling you, it's not a good idea because, to do it together because of what happened last year. They could have very easily said, well, we saw what happened last year and how terrible that is, and therefore, obviously, this year we're not going to be drinking. Because they did not say that, this shows that they realized that there is a mitzvah of drinking on Purim, and you can't just give that up because last year, it was a very close call. It's not enough. So the Eshkol takes the exact opposite approach in saying that the fact that this story is in the Talmud shows that despite the dangers, we still have the mitzvah of drinking on Purim. And Rambam, his language is very interesting because he does say that you should drink wine, but you should drink up until the point that you will fall asleep. So who do you think he follows? That's like something you wouldn't expect. He should drink until he falls asleep. So who is he following? Is he following Rabbeinu Ephraim, who says there's no mitzvah of drinking, or is he following the Eshkol?
He's following that there is a mitzvah to drink.
That there is a mitzvah. So first of all, you're saying it can't be that it's Rabbeinu Ephraim. Okay, because obviously, right, according to Rabbeinu Ephraim, the whole thing is deleted. There is no such thing. Okay. Now, so you could explain that he's interpreting ad de lo yada, because once you're asleep, so you're not aware and you're not capable of analyzing differences between blessed and cursed, and therefore the fulfillment is by falling asleep. Or you could say that the way I like your interpretation in the beginning of that he's going somewhere in the middle. He's saying, look, there is a mitzvah to drink, but keep it mild, make sure that it doesn't get out of hand, because if you really take this to be literally adela, so look at where we can end up. So now let's take a look at Shulchan Aruch. This is source Yudav, so in Simon Tafresh Sadehei, 695. The Shulchan Aruch says, so very interestingly, all he does is quote Rava. And I saw explanations that say he deliberately did that. Because if you just bring Rava, you sort of, you're saying, hey, this is not my problem. I don't have to deal with this, with all these different interpretations. Was Rava rejected, or do we still follow Rava? Because I'm just quoting, don't shoot the messenger. So he just quotes Rava. He doesn't give you the limits. He doesn't mention Rambam. But the Ramah does mention Rambam. Yesh omrim ve'ein tzarich lishtaker kol kach. So you should drink a little more than you are used to, and then fall asleep. Once you fall asleep, so you're not aware and you won't understand the difference between being blessed and cursed. And then he ends with a very important sentence. Doesn't matter if you end up drinking a lot, if you end up drinking a little, if you end up drinking not at all. Point is, are you doing what a Kadosh Baruch Hu asked you to do, or at least do you think that you're doing what Kadosh Baruch Hu asked you to do? And that is really the most important thing. Because if you know what happens to you when you get drunk, and that it gets very ugly, so obviously you're not supposed to do that. If you know that you're capable of drinking and keeping it holy and keeping it spiritual and making sure, first of all, on the most basic level of keeping aesthetic, not throwing up, not being gross, and the kind of words that you'll be saying, the kind of people you're going to be spending time with. For instance, I think that it's a very, very bad idea to have co-ed drinking. That's not going to end up very good. On many different levels. So you really have to think about the setting you're going to be in, knowing yourself, knowing your body, taking it easy. And whatever you end up doing, really do it for the sake of the mitzvah. Because again, there are different approaches, and you'll be able to find any approach you want. Because I've heard people arguing about this like so much. Oh, it's like so disgusting. You should never do that. And some person, what do you want? It's in the Talmud. This is the mitzvah. As we saw, you could really take it to at least three main different directions that we just mentioned. And the most important is to remember what the Ramah concludes with, is that anything you do is really, the most important is that it's really l'shem shamayim. It's really for the sake of the mitzvah and not just having, oh, great, this is a great opportunity to abuse alcohol in the name of halacha. And to conclude with what I started off with, the point is that really there is something deep about substances that can change our awareness. And here there's like a little opening within halacha to use this for a positive purpose. And I really think that if one does this correctly, and in the holy and spiritual way, so you can reach a state of mind that you say, wow, this is who I can be all year round if I really work hard enough. So it's just like showing you sort of like the innate capabilities, whatever you can actually, the potential that you can later bring out, and then go ahead and for a whole nother year try to really work and achieve that. For instance, I've seen people who are generally very aggressive become extremely gentle and sensitive, and they're listening and they're talking, they're telling everyone how much they love them, and they're so sorry for the kind of way for the ways they talk to them and so on. And I think that in a contained way, that's a beautiful thing, because you would never hear this person talking this way if you didn't have a couple of drinks. So what this person should be doing is saying, hey, look at who I can be. Generally, look at how I'm talking, how many sorries I have to, how many apologies I have to offer people. This is who I can be. And don't go on now for 365 more days, use wine to do that or any other substance. Rather, find the power within to really reach that state. So, again, bottom line is, within a contained way, it can be very positive. There's a lot that we can do with this. And okay, so have a happy Purim, whatever you do, if you're in classes.